All right, let's jump right into something that is, well, pretty wild. We're talking about Jāmī's brain map, a poet's guide to consciousness. And I want to start with a question that sounds kind of nuts. Can a poem written almost 600 years ago actually be a map for how your brain works right now? I know, it sounds like science fiction, but just hang with me here. So, on one side, we've got this ancient mystical epic poem called Haft Awrang, or The Seven Thrones. And on the other, we've got something called the Brain Kinematics Model, a super modern scientific theory about how we form thoughts. Today, we're putting them head to head, because we are going to explore this incredible idea that maybe, just maybe, this masterpiece of literature is more than just a story about a spiritual journey. It might just be an unintentional but shockingly accurate blueprint for consciousness itself. So, let's get into it. Let's unpack this poet's map of the brain and see if we can really find the structure of thought hidden inside. First things first, let's meet our poet. His name was Jāmī, a brilliant Persian mystic from the 15th century. His masterwork, Haft Awrang, is this amazing collection of 7 poems. The whole thing is structured like a climb, designed to take the reader on this ascent, from the everyday world up to the divine. Okay, now for the science. The Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM for short. It's a new theory that says every single thought you have, no matter how big or small, basically follows the arc of a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, starting with simple input and building to complex meaning. Yeah, think of it like a tiny movie playing in your head, thousands of times a day. First, there's the introduction, where all the sensory data rushes in. Then you get a rising conflict as emotions start to build up. You hit a climax. That's the peak feeling. And finally, you get the resolution, the aha moment, where you find some kind of insight. Your brain is a natural-born storyteller. So, you ready? Let's start climbing this ladder ourselves. We're going to begin at the very foundation of every thought, raw sensation. So, what even is sensation? Well, it's the brain's first handshake with reality. It's just the raw, unprocessed data. Sights, sounds, even those little gut feelings you get about what's right and wrong, before your brain has really done anything with it. And this is where it gets really interesting. This is where the two worlds just click. The BKM model maps Jāmī's poem right onto our brain's processes. So let's start at the bottom of the ladder, sensation. The argument here is that this experience is perfectly mirrored in the first 2 books of Haft Awrang. And check out how brilliantly this works. Jāmī's first book, Chain of Gold, is basically a collection of short ethical stories. They act like raw data points for your conscience. Then the second book, the really famous story of Joseph and Selselat, is all about the overwhelming power of sensory beauty. It's the world presented as just pure, powerful input. Okay, so we've got the raw data coming in. Let's move up to the next level, where things get messy. We're going from just observing the world to feeling it. This is where the brain starts adding emotion to the mix. Feeling is basically the brain's way of deciding what matters. It takes those patterns it's been noticing and charges them up with emotional weight. Conflict, longing, desire. This is what gives a story its heat. So, back to our ladder. We're climbing up to the middle now, and you can see it right there. The process of feeling, that moment of emotional conflict and climax, corresponds directly to the 4th book in Jāmī's epic sequence. And that 4th book, Selselat and ʿAbd, is the perfect allegory for this stage. It tells the story of a soul struggling with worldly attachments and desire. In other words, it's pure emotional turbulence, perfectly mirroring the brain as it hits its own feeling climax. And now for the final step in our climb. This is where all that raw, messy emotion gets transformed into something higher. We're moving from feeling to wisdom, reaching the very summit of thought. Cognition. This is the brain's grand finale. It's where all that emotional experience gets refined, distilled down into abstract insight, philosophy, and real wisdom. It's where we finally make sense of it all. Looking at our map one last time, we've arrived at the top of the ladder. Cognition, the creation of abstract wisdom and insight, is perfectly mirrored by the final 3 books of Jāmī's epic. The very last book, Alexander's Book of Wisdom, is essentially the prefrontal cortex of the entire collection. It's the brain's CEO. It takes all the sensory input and emotional struggle from the earlier poems and transforms it into clear philosophical principles about life. So this brings us to the big reveal, the big so what? Why on earth does this ancient poem line up so perfectly with modern neuroscience? Is this just a massive cosmic coincidence? Well, the answer is actually pretty profound. It seems that great art, especially art that tries to map the human soul, can't help but mirror the brain's own deepest patterns. The structure of a great story literally follows the structure of a thought. Which means that the mystical journey of spiritual ascent that Jāmī laid out is basically the same as the brain's journey of cognitive ascent. From sensation to feeling to wisdom, they're the same path. Think about it. Jāmī didn't know anything about neurons or the prefrontal cortex. He couldn't have, but he didn't need to. He knew humanity. He understood the architecture of the human soul. And in mapping that journey so perfectly, he inadvertently mapped the very organ that produces it. And that just leaves us with this incredible thought to ponder. If this is true for Jāmī, what other great masterpieces of art and literature are out there, just secretly waiting to be read as maps of the human mind?